Hey, my name is Nikita and this is Flex Virtual Kitchen, the show where we cook and talk with interesting people about their amazing experiences and just having fun. So stay tuned and let's get started. Hello everyone, and our guest today is Mackenzie. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Mackenzie. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Solonitsevka, Ukraine, and I'm originally from Florida.
All right, sounds great. And what are we making today?
We are making my grandma's recipe for pumpkin pie. Remember, it's very important to wash your hands and pull your hair back before you start cooking so no hair gets in the pie. So to make pumpkin pie, you need a few ingredients. The first would be pumpkin. It should be pureed. You can make the pumpkin soft, cook it either in boiling water or roast it in the oven so that it gets soft and you can easily puree it. And you need about 2 cups. In order to make the dough, you need flour, again 2 cups of flour, a ½ cup of oil, and then 1/3 cup of ice water. It's important that the water is cold. You mix the oil and the flour together first, and then you slowly add in the ice water until it forms a ball like this. To mix with the pumpkin and make it taste good, you're going to need sugar and some spices. First you need 1/3 cup of sugar, just regular granular sugar, and then you need ground cloves, cinnamon, and ginger, and then 2 eggs, and the eggs will help the pumpkin form into the pie. You also need heavy cream. In the US we would use evaporated milk, but in Ukraine you can just use heavy cream if you can't find evaporated milk. And the same that normally I would use Libby's pureed pumpkin in a can, but since I don't have that, you can make it from fresh pumpkin.
So what are we doing now?
So now we're rolling out our dough. You're going to need to put parchment paper down or wax paper, or you could even use cellophane if you don't have anything else. And then a little bit of flour on the parchment paper so that the dough doesn't stick very much. And you're done. You take another piece of parchment paper, some more flour, and you put it on top. And then you either use a rolling pin or you can use any kind of round stick and just roll out your dough.
All right, Mackenzie, can you tell us what are your favorite Ukrainian dishes?
My favorite Ukrainian dishes would have to be vareniki, so Ukrainian dumplings, or anything my host mom makes.
Okay, and what is your host mom making?
Oh my gosh, my host mom makes a lot. Normal things like borscht, of course, chicken with potatoes, shashliki. I do love shashliki. At a dacha or in the woods in the summer is like the best thing about living in Ukraine.
Okay, that's great. And what was the first thing that you tried when you came to Ukraine?
The first thing I tried when I came to Ukraine? Oh gosh, I don't remember. I think the first thing that I remember trying would have been on Ukrainian Independence Day, like the first Ukrainian Independence Day. I was here for in Zhytomyr. And I went to some small restaurant with my host family, and I was just really nervous and didn't understand anything that anybody was saying. And my host mom forced me to eat. And so I had I think vareniki with cherries or something.
Okay, that sounds delicious. And why did you become a Peace Corps volunteer in the first place?
So I've always loved other cultures and different people, and always wanted to learn more about the world and about different people and cultures. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of people in my life who helped me as a kid and in school, and a lot of different organizations, so I always wanted to give back in that way. So I wanted to be a Peace Corps volunteer from the time I first heard about it in the 8th grade. Okay, Nikita, you've seen how I've been rolling it out, so now you can help me a little bit.
All right.
And while Nikita rolls that out, I will start with our puree. We should add our sugar from our ingredients list along with our spices into our pureed pumpkin.
Why did you choose Ukraine?
So I had a background in education, And Ukraine, at the time that I applied, was going through the whole new Ukrainian school reform. So it was like this giant reform, this nationwide reform in education, and I wanted to be a part of that moment in history and help educators who had taught one way for the entirety of their careers learn how to do this kind of new method.
Okay. And were you happy when you found out that you were going to Ukraine?
Oh yeah, I was really ecstatic. I called my mom and was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Ukraine, I'm leaving for the Peace Corps. It's like a year from now, but I'm going. Yeah, I was really happy.
And what did your mother say? Was she happy that you were going so far away, or was she nervous about it?
So she was actually said, oh, that's great, your brother has an interview for a job in Ukraine. So I came to Ukraine at the same time that my older brother was working in Ukraine. So she was happy that I had family here already.
Okay, so your brother was living here?
Yes.
And is he still here?
No, he's back in the US now. He was here for about 2 years.
2 years, okay. And what were his impressions about Ukraine?
He liked Ukraine. He was in Donbass, so he had a lot of a different experience than me. And we met up once so that I could show him Kyiv and Maidan and all these historical places. But he had a totally different experience than me, living, in the second biggest city in Kharkiv, and he's in like a tiny village. So I just added the heavy cream, and we're mixing that in, and now we're going to add in 2 eggs.
Okay. And what did you know about Ukraine before coming here?
I actually really did not know very much about Ukraine before coming. I tried to do some research to prepare myself, and all I found was that winters are very cold, and I should prepare for this because I'm from Florida, where we don't have winter at all.
Was the winter really cold when you came here?
So it wasn't so cold, but it was so snowy. It was like a winter, the first winter I was here was like a winter from a fairy tale or a movie or something. It was just so snowy and wonderful.
Okay, and since you're from Florida, was it the first time when you saw real snow?
It wasn't the first time I had seen snow, but it was the first time that I had lived in a place where there was snow. I had seen snow and gone on vacation somewhere for a week at a time before, but it was the first time that I had snow and cold for months at a time.
Okay, that's great. And another question is about language. Was it hard to learn a new language?
I would say yes and no. The hardest part for me is that I learned Russian. And so when people speak Ukrainian, I'm like, do I just not understand, or is this a totally different language and that's why I don't understand? Or I'll pick up some words that are Ukrainian or that are just things that kids say in school, and then adults are like, why are you saying that? That's not correct. We're going to oil and flour our form. We put a little parchment paper on the bottom just to help it not stick very much. Some people like to use butter, but because there's oil in our dough, I like to keep it the same and use oil in the pan. So, before going to Ukraine, did you have to do some kind of training? So we met for one weekend before we actually flew to Ukraine, and then as soon as we flew to Ukraine, we had a week-long training in a hotel before we went to host families. And then we had 2 months of training, both in language, where we did language 4 hours every day for 6 days a week, and in methodology of teaching. If someone was in a different sector, they had different trainings. So once you've oiled the pan, you're going to toss flour in and then just kind of bump it around. This process is a little messy, so make sure you have a workspace that you're okay getting flour on, or clothes you're okay getting flour on.
All right, and so 4 hours of training a new language every day, was it hard for you mentally?
Yeah, it was really hard. Eventually, you're just like, I can't learn anything more. I don't know anything at all. There's just this point where you're on information overload. But it was okay. It was really useful, especially when what you're learning in the classroom, you can then go out in the street and use with people or use in the grocery store, and it helps you kind of live.
And And was there anyone who were supporting you while you, in the moments of frustration or while you had some problems going on here? So did you have anyone in Ukraine, or was anyone supporting you from the United States?
Yeah, so as a Peace Corps volunteer, we had a lot of in-country staff that were really great, doctors that were Ukrainians, but knew English probably better than I do, especially when it comes to medical problems, and they were very helpful and would serve as translators when we needed them to. And like a whole team of people in an office in Kyiv to help us. But also, really, one thing that really helped me was having my brother in Ukraine, because I could call him and complain about something like, oh, the lady in the pharmacy like didn't understand what I wanted, and he could say that he had the same problem, kind of thing.
And he was also living in Ukraine, so he would, you know, fully understand all of your problems. Yeah.
Exactly, and we didn't have a time difference, so I could call him, and it wasn't like the middle of the night.
Okay, so and about the time difference, was it a problem for you? So, for example, when you wanted to talk with your parents, with your friends from the US, and you know, with this time difference, was it hard to adjust, you know, your way of living?
Yeah, so the time difference can be hard, especially when night for me is like the middle of the day for them, so they're at work and I can't really talk to them, and then the afternoon for me is the morning for them, so that can be difficult. Adjusting to the time difference was also kind of hard. It took me like a month to adjust to the time difference. It's a lot easier to fly from Ukraine to the US and adjust than it is to fly from the US to Ukraine for me. I would like stay up until 1 a.m. every night just because I couldn't fall asleep, and then be tired in the afternoon the next day. So now we're going to transfer our dough into our pie tin. And at this point our dough is now basically crust. So you keep it on the parchment paper in order to flip it over once your tin is fully oiled and floured.
Okay, do you need my help?
Oh, it's okay.
All right.
And then you kind of just flip it on top and peel away the parchment paper.
So what is our next step?
Once we've laid our dough into our tin, we're going to stab it with a fork a bunch of times, just so that while it's baking, any air can escape out. And if you don't do this, your dough will like form a giant bubble and pop, or just not leave enough space for your filling. And then we're going to bake this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 177 Celsius, for 15 minutes, just so that it hardens, because once we put the filling in, the dough on the bottom will stop to cook. So now that our dough has been in the oven for about 15 minutes, it's become a crust, it's hardened, it's pulled away from the edges a little, and we will add our pumpkin pie mixture into our crust. You don't want to overfill it because it is liquid, and as you move it into the oven, it could spill.
Okay, it looks delicious. So, and can you tell us a little bit more about the process of applying to become a PCV?
Yeah, so there's an online application. You can choose between applying to a specific country and a specific position, like I did with secondary school volunteer in Ukraine, or you can apply to go anywhere and do anything. And you apply online, there's some essays, you upload your resume, there is an interview. Our pie in the oven.
Okay, and I'm going to open the oven.
So we just took our pie out of the oven. You want to jiggle it a little, and if the pie itself, the filling, doesn't move, that's how you know it's done. About 40 to 50 minutes.
Smells delicious. Okay, so, and our guest today was Mackenzie Moore.